Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Art of Unraveling. We are here on the podcast as well as you can watch the video version on YouTube. And of course, as always, we would love for you to subscribe to the channel, uh, like this video, and that just shows the algorithm that there's information here that people like. So, thank you for being here. So, today I wanted to talk about, I just got done doing a talk at a women's luncheon here in Clearwater, Tampa area, and it was for a group of women that are in tourism. It's literally called Women in Tourism, and my neighbor is a part of it, and that's how I got involved. And it was really great. And I decided to do my talk on why burnout is happening and healing burnout through nervous system resilience. And I thought that would be a great thing to share with you today. So, why is burnout happening? And in my research for doing this talk, I learned that 30 to 46% of women are experiencing burnout. And I think those numbers are just going to keep rising. And there's a few reasons for that. And I'm going to get into those reasons, but if you're new here, you may not know my story. And so I'm just going to briefly share it because obviously there's many other videos and podcasts I've done about this topic. But just to briefly share, I have been in the wellness world. I was a yoga teacher for up to 10 years at the time that I experienced one of my many experiences of burnout. I had been doing yoga, I had been meditating, I had been a Reiki master teacher, a theta healer, which is another form of energy work. I'd been doing all of these things for my wellness. And yet in 2020, I had turned 40 years old and my body completely broke down. I ended up getting two autoimmune disorders. I had hypothyroidism and chronic fatigue. And there was no explanation for it because I didn't really drink much, didn't smoke, didn't eat bad. I worked out. It they're just it the math didn't math why I would be suffering the way that I was. And I literally tried every supplement. If you told me this thing will give you energy, I bought it. I spent thousands and thousands of dollars on supplements and programs, and nothing worked. And when I say I was tired, I'm not just like, oh yeah, didn't sleep well the night before, kind of tired. No, this was like full exhaustion. Like I felt like I was dragging myself around behind me, is the best way I can describe it. It's just, I'm a very passionate, motivated person, and it's like I just didn't have any of that. It just all went out the window. I didn't feel like myself. And most days I had to be in bed by like 1 or 2 p.m. and not even to sleep. I just needed to be laying flat. And I would work from bed. I'd put my feet up so my knees were up. I would put my feet on the bed so that my knees could be up, and then I'd put my laptop there and I would just sit and work. Because again, I just needed to be laying down. And it was a really scary time because I thought this is how my life's going to be now. I didn't have a social life. I really didn't get to hang out with my friends much. My husband, he was a saint through all of that. We were just dating at the time. Um, and I was scared. I was scared for myself. And so my doctor put me on thyroid medication. And that was supposed to help because my thyroid levels were just slightly low. They weren't too bad. And so it's like, okay, this is going to help. And it didn't. I got pellets where they would like slice open my butt cheek, essentially the side of my butt cheek, and put testosterone pellets in. That was supposed to be the miracle cure. That didn't help. And it was like $500 every time I needed to do that. I tried all these things. The next step that my doctor wanted to do was antidepressants. And I just said, look, I'm not depressed. I'm exhausted. I'm not depressed. And I took, as I do, I remember I went and I picked up the antidepressants, and then I got depressed. I was just like, oh my gosh, this isn't me. And so I did what I do, and that is I started doing research. And I started making these connections between childhood trauma, your adverse childhood experiences, and score, and autoimmune disorders, anxiety, depression, and just how all of that is so connected. I talk about that in great deal in my book, The Art of Unraveling, and which, if you're watching on YouTube, it's just right here. That's what it looks like. It's on Amazon. You can also get it on my website. But I found, just as the universe does, as we're meant to find something, it will find us. I started getting all this kind of information coming to me about nervous system work and somatic work and nervous system healing. And I started deep diving into that. And within 6 months of doing that work, I healed chronic fatigue, and I was able to wean off slowly with my doctor's help off of my thyroid medication, because that had never changed how I felt. Even when my levels became more normal, it didn't help me. And I remember having a conversation with my doctor and just being like, he's like, "Oh, why do you want to get off?" He was very, he didn't try to talk me out of it, which I appreciate when it came to me wanting to get off my thyroid medication. But he did say, why do you want to do that? And I just said, because I started learning about childhood trauma, the connection between childhood trauma and autoimmune disorders. And he was just like, oh, yeah. And he kind of like shook his head, yes. And I was just like, I just remember sitting there thinking, like, so you knew this, but never once was any of that discussed. It's just pushing medication. Now, I'm not here to like beat up on doctors or the medical system. They're just trained to do things a certain way. And unfortunately, it's just not the full picture and it's not working. But that's not what today's podcast is about. But I could go on and do a whole topic about that, because it's disheartening. And it's my wish and my hope that someday there will be somebody in every doctor's office where that person has the time to sit down and talk to each patient about their trauma and like get a record of it and be able to suggest other things other than medication. But anyway, that would change our whole medical system, wouldn't it? So then there wouldn't be as much money. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. I'm not going to go there. I just did, but I'm not going to go further into it. But let's get back to burnout. So that was me experiencing classic burnout by going into this chronic fatigue. And what I didn't understand is that I had been in chronic states of dysregulation with my nervous system because of trauma that I experienced, because I got wired to believe that, like, not even to believe, my nervous system wired for anxiety, it wired for threat. It felt unsafe most of the time because that's how my childhood was. It was very unsafe. And so when we live in a constant state of dysregulation where we're just always amped up, that's not sustainable. We can sustain it maybe in our 20s. We can do a lot of things in our 20s and sometimes in our 30s. By the time you hit your 40s, things will start to break down. And so I want to keep sharing this message because I don't want people to experience that. The other thing, too, is for many women, it's perimenopausal time. That's when the body does start breaking down. Our hormones start changing. We can't get away with things the way we used to. And that's when a lot of women start seeking me out around that age, because things are changing. All of a sudden, my anxiety's through the roof, or my body's breaking down, or I'm depressed. And so hormones are playing a part, but it's the stuff that's underneath that. It's the chronically dysregulated nervous system that's actually causing the hormones to get um, out of whack, right? So some women can go through perimenopause and not experience a single thing. Some women don't even know they're in perimenopause. And some of us experience perimenopause in a massive way because, in my opinion, I believe because if there's unprocessed trauma, if there's a chronically dysregulated nervous system from unprocessed trauma, that creates inflammation, that creates an increase of release of cortisol. And already in perimenopause, cortisol is higher anyway. So if you already have a chronically dysregulated nervous system that's releasing lots of cortisol, and then you couple that with perimenopause, where cortisol is already higher, plus all the other things that go along with that, it's a recipe for disaster. So I think if you're somebody that's experiencing perimenopause or menopause in a really harsh way, then there's some deeper work there. And I'll never forget, and then maybe I've shared this before, but this healer I met when I was in Kauai, and he talked about how there's these stages that we go through. And the first stage is the lover, and this is like when we're born until like our maybe 19 or so. And then we go into the warrior stage. So like in our 20s and early 30s, I'd say 20s and 30s, you're in this warrior stage. When that's where it's like you just have this positive mindset and you can like get things done and you're going after things and you've got all the energy and you can just push and fight and do all these things, right? That's like the warrior. And then in your 40s, you hit what's called the sage. And then after the sage, I don't know how long the sage lasts. I can't really remember. But then there's one more stage, and that's like your crone stage, where you become that wise man or woman. But he said, when you hit the sage, if there was trauma or if there was anything in the lover stage, so of course, our childhood, there was anything in that stage where you didn't feel loved, when you hit the sage stage in your 40s, you will have to go back and look at that. You'll have to go back and heal that. You'll have to go back and revisit that, whatever word you want to use there. But essentially, it's saying we have to go back and revisit those pieces, essentially where the unprocessed trauma was, in order to move into a healthy sage time of your life. And I think about that a lot because I think that's what happens in perimenopause. I think perimenopause is this age where we are being asked to go back and look at things and become wiser, right? That is the sage time, is we become wiser through what we go back and heal, or what we learned as we step gracefully into the next phases of our life. So one thing we have to go back and look at, if you're like me and you're experiencing burnout, if you're in that 30 to 46% of women that are experiencing burnout, why is that happening? Why are so many women, I mean, we could think of a lot of reasons why, but the first one is this hyper responsibility. Like we think a lot of this is programmed. We think we have to be responsible for everybody. We have to manage everybody's experiences. We have to make sure everybody's happy. We have to make sure everybody's got what they need. We get into that people pleasing. We get into that perfectionism, and we take on everybody's stuff and feel responsible. I had a client recently say, she's a stay-at-home mom, so with 3 kids, and she's got like so many things going on, and she is really the one doing most of the caretaking of the children because her husband works a lot. And she had so much anxiety, and she just said, if I mess up, it affects everybody. I have to be responsible for everybody. And that's just so much to carry. And it steals our joy. It takes away the present moment experiences. And that is a huge drain on our system, and that is hugely affecting burnout. It will lead to burnout if I feel like I have to manage everybody. And the other thing too is I call it being everyone's emotional support animal. In my book, I talk about that. And that's, it's like we become these emotional regulators, some of us, for everybody. Again, checking the temperature of the room, making sure everybody's got what they need, making sure everybody's happy. And a lot of it is just, it's done very unconsciously, and it's draining us. The other thing is this accessibility, everybody having accessibility to us, texting, phones, social media, um, email. And if you have perfectionism tendencies, you probably feel like I got to get back to these people right away. So there's this constant urgency in the system, this urgency to hurry up and respond. And I mean, I have one friend, my good friend from college, and it's like sometimes she won't even respond. And that can drive you crazy when you have friends like that, but also I just respect it because it's like she's not living in that state of I have to respond to this person right away just because they sent something to me. So, and then the other piece that I think comes up for people is living in productivity mode. So a lot of us have a belief that our worth comes from what we achieve. And this is an unconscious belief, but see, we're not even aware that that's there sometimes. And yet we're constantly pushing, we're constantly going, we're constantly doing. And all of that creates this drain on our system and leads to burnout. And we feel like we can't slow down. And we've learned as a society that to put others' needs before our own, and that's just not sustainable. Like if you're not thinking about yourself ever, if you're not taking care of you, you will burn out. If you're the one that's always managing everybody else's experiences around you, you will burn out. There's just no doubt. If you are trying to be somebody, get somewhere, get your worth out of something externally from you, something that's not from within you, something out here, you will burn out. And one thing that I want to share that I am it's kind of a I call it like an initiation. So it's kind of like some things I'm moving through in this current moment. Today's talk, I think it's more the getting worked up before the actual talk that freaks me out more than actually doing it. Because once I was up there, I was comfortable. I was, very much working the whole room and I felt great. But it was like before that, I was just like, oh my God, I have this talk to do. Like it's almost like I just didn't even want to do it because it was creating like all these anxiety things for me. Like, am I gonna what if I screw up? What if I just stand there like a deer in headlights in the middle of my talk or something. It's just like you have all these weird thoughts before you do something. And even though I've taught yoga, I teach workshops all the time, and I talk for way longer than I had to today. I only had to talk for like 15 minutes. It it just it's the anxiety before you have to go do it. So what I was going to say is I think leading up to, and I know I've shared recently about writing my book and like all the stuff that brought up. What I'm feeling today after doing this talk is it's really about letting go of expectations. I think when you grow up with trauma, and this comes back to the worth piece, like growing, when you, one of the ways we burn ourselves out is thinking our worth comes from what we achieve. And when you grow up the way that I did, which my story is in the book, The Art of Unraveling, I grew up like feeling very unloved by my mom, much loved by my grandparents and extended family, but by my own mom. And when you grow up with that, there's this inner part of me, my younger me, that wants to feel special, that wants to feel loved, that wants to feel good enough. And she and I work on that a lot. But I think because I was writing the book for so long, 8 years of writing, 8+ years of writing my book, and it just took me a really long time. I would take full years off of writing. So it's not like it was this extensive period of writing, but I think there were all these expectations I had that when I finished the book, that's when everything would happen. That's when my life would take off. That's when my business would blow up. That's when I would be where I'm supposed to be. And there were these expectations of how that was going to look that I would think about when I was writing it. You know, it's like, oh, this is good. I can't wait for this to happen. I can't wait to finish writing this book so that these things will happen for me. And I think about it's like the same thing, there's people that are single that are like, oh, when I find my beloved, then my life will be perfect. Then everything will fall into place. Or, when I get that job, then, it's like whatever that thing is for you. And that is such a trap. And it goes against the very nature of the universe, the very nature of life. Because nothing outside of you or me will ever show you that you're enough. Because when I wrote my book, and unfortunately recently I went and looked and I was like, oh, I've only sold this many. And I kind of had a sad story about that in my mind because it's like I wanted to sell thousands. And, the book is out there for the rest of my life. Like it's going to keep selling. And I am grateful and so proud of what I have sold. But there's this piece in there, and I'm being vulnerable with you in this video and this podcast because I think this is so important for people like us that had childhood trauma or that put so much stake in our achievements. Because I know for myself, there is no there. It's like I wrote the book and now it's like, okay, I'm on to the next, what next? Now I'm going to do the next book, or now I want to do this, now I want to do that. And there was today's talk just and leading up to it just really had me thinking about things. And I just went up there and I was just like kind of having this like Zen moment where I was like, this means nothing and it means everything. And even just thinking about myself, I am nothing. And I house everything within me. But I think I've been really kind of sitting with the I am nothing because not from like a wah state, but I heard another YouTuber talk about this and it just really clicked for me because I think that's where I'm getting a little bit lost and my ego is getting caught up in the how this should look. And my inner child is like wanting to feel that specialness, like I got chosen to speak at this event today. And had I gone in with these expectations, because even my husband was like, oh, aren't you excited? Da, 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 da. And I was very cool as a cucumber about it. And I'm just like, well, because I've done these kinds of things before, and it's like, it's a little bit different doing something where people have to sit and listen to you versus people coming and paying for like a workshop where they kind of know what they're getting into with me versus people just like coming to a luncheon and then like I happen to be the speaker. It's just a little bit different. And so it's not going to land with everybody, even though, in my opinion, everybody needs nervous system regulation because we live in a crazy, dysregulated world. The truth is, it's just not going to land with everybody the way that I speak or the way that I talk. And that's true even for people that come to paid events. But the point of this is like going back to my book, I think for those events, I think I'm a little bit in a burnout phase right now from being so wrapped up in everything I had to do for my book. And I'm still kind of coming out of that. And again, I think it goes back to having all these expectations about what that meant for me, like to be an author, to have this book, and to sell all these copies, and I get to travel and do all this stuff. And it's like, that just wasn't really what happened. And there were some amazing things that happened. And I felt like I was on cloud freaking nine when I was doing my book tour. But you come home and I'm still the same person. Like no, like I haven't changed. And so my point in this, and I am kind of unraveling this in the moment, and so I didn't think I was maybe going to go to this place today, but I do think it's an interesting thing to think about that our ego is the one that has the expectations. And our ego isn't bad. It's a part of us. We can't get rid of it. But my ego was wrapped up in wanting to be special and wanting to have this thing and to share it. And today, I think it went as well as it did because I didn't let that in the space I was in. I just showed up and I'm like, this is me. And I was just like, I am nothing and I'm everything all at the same time. And I think I sold like 3 books, so it wasn't like anything, and numbers aren't really a thing to me anyway. But I had people coming up to me and they were just like, I want to have you come speak at this thing for me. And we're looking for a yoga person for this thing. And there were these opportunities, that started possibly expressing themselves. And I think that was possible because I just remained neutral about the event. And I've heard over the years, many different spiritual talks of this, but now I think writing my book, and more importantly, putting my book out there was such a deep initiation. It's been several, like I could I'm getting a little teary just talking about it because it's been several initiations, what I call initiations, which are how I'm reframing the hard things we go through. Because damn, I used to think, is this hard stuff ever going to stop? Like, I feel like sometimes I go through some really intense things. Not that I'm special in that way at all, but it's like, wow. And I know some of you listening, I know a lot of my clients feel the same way. It's just like, dang, this is hard. I really see these hard things we go through as being initiations into our own self mastery. A part of me stepping into more self mastery, more Christ consciousness, if you will, more of my higher self, is releasing my expectations on an external event making me feel and be more worthy or more successful or more special or more loved, because that's my inner child. That's her yearning for more love and to understand that like that can exist, but that's not running the show anymore. I get to love her and I get to show her that she's special and I get to help her feel like she really is good enough because she is. But nothing outside of me will ever be that. Nothing outside of me will ever reflect back to me how good I am. It just can't. And if I'm expecting it to on some level, I'm expecting that I show up and speak and I sell tons of copies of my books and everybody wants to hire me. That's not realistic. And that's not going to happen if I have the expectation there. The expectation is the ego, and the ego is blocking. It's not my amigo, it's blocking abundance from flowing into me. These expectations are blocking success, they're blocking joy, they're blocking the present moment because on some level I'm not going to be present. I'm going to be in my head thinking, did I say the right thing? Do they like me? I was just very in flow today. And I did find myself a little bit shaky. So I could feel the nerves, but I worked the room. I looked people in the eye. I really involved everybody. And it was very informative. People came up and said, this is so informative. And I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that like, oh, I don't know. So that this was a very vulnerable podcast to share with you, but I think so many of us can relate to this. And I think this is something to really be talked about because it's so unconscious. And yet these expectations and this need for external validation to tell me I'm lovable, I'm good enough, just comes from our wounded little inner children. And it's our job to love on them. I'm going to be doing a inner child workshop coming up soon, and I will have the date soon. But message me if that's something you're interested in, where we're going to go deep into inner child healing. That is one of my favorite things. It's extremely powerful. And also, I want to share too, if you are wanting the handout for burnt out women that I gave in my talk today, I gave them all a handout. It's got tools on it for helping you regulate your nervous system so that you can begin to move out of burnout. Message me. You can email me at purelighealings with an S at gmail.com. You can message me on Instagram at purelight_healing or Facebook and just say, I would love that burnout handout. Or if you want the inner child workshop information, I will be doing an inner child healing workshop, and we will go deep into helping your inner with feeling enough, helping build up and reparent her or him so that we are no longer needing, or needing less this external validation, and really beginning to, yeah, just fill up our own cup, know that we are enough. But we can't just say that. I can't stress enough that just walking around saying I am enough, it doesn't heal your nervous system. It doesn't heal your inner child. There's deeper processes, in my opinion, that you need to do in order to begin to reparent. And this isn't just a one-off thing, but I'll give you some tools to use that you can use beyond the workshop. So anyway, that's coming up. It's very important to me, this work, and I hope this podcast was helpful. Let me know your thoughts. And again, if you want that handout for managing burnout symptoms or helping burnout systems through nervous system resilience, shoot me a message. I thank you for being here. I thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time.